Hi there, everyone, and welcome. Really great to have you with us today. Thank you for joining us for the TimesLIVE Dialogues partnership with First for Women Insurance. Now, I have the privilege of being with you this afternoon to discuss a hugely important topic, not just during Women's Month, but one that should dominate our thoughts all the time. The numbers are really astonishing in our country. We live in what our president has called one of the most unsafe places in the world to be a woman. In South Africa, a woman is murdered every 3 hours. And last year, there were more than 52,000 sexual offences cases. In many ways, these figures were really a tipping point for South Africa. The president held a summit in which he decided this was going to be the basis to tackle this brutal reality head on. Many sectors of the country were already reassessing their approach at this time, including corporate South Africa. First for Women took a moment to reevaluate its foundation's approach to fighting women abuse, and it launched a new preventative and response program that addresses the root causes of the pandemic in the country. Importantly, what all of these approaches concede is that we as women often live lives marked by fear. It doesn't matter what age we are, it doesn't matter how we are raised or into what socioeconomic group we fall, what religion or creed we adhere to. Fear is woven into the fabric of our identities and how we negotiate the world around us and the society which we inhabit as well. This is how this discussion around fearlessness came about. Firstly, it acknowledges that fear is, of course, an evolutionary tactic that we have learned. It's been built into us for survival. But what we're tackling today is the fear that's become environmental. It's the fear that's become social and cultural, among other influences on our lives. And we're looking at whether it's holding us back as human beings. We're looking at what we need to do to break free from its shackles at this point in our lives. First for Women thought our 2019 Miss South Africa, who now holds the coveted global title of Miss Universe, Zozibini Tunzi, who you see there, beautiful and inside and out, I might tell you, is a great example of a woman who's pushed fear to the limits. She's bravely taken her place on the international stage. And on Wednesday, the 5th of August, First for Women launched a new campaign called Fearless with Zozi. And it encourages us all, as the women of South Africa, to resist fear, to confront it, and fight back against it with the ultimate intention of empowering women to realize their indomitable strength. I want to give you a little bit more background to this. Take a look.
Ladies,
try to hold me back, but I just never listen. They try to break me down and doubt my own existence. They wanna take control, but no one ever got me. They try to keep me slow, but they could never stop me.
ladies, what would you do if you were fearless?
As you're well aware, Zozibini Tunzi is a vocal advocate in the fight against gender-based violence, and born in the Eastern Cape in September 1993, she began as a South African model and beauty pageant holder, and who was crowned Miss Universe last year. Now, she'd previously been crowned Miss South Africa before that, as I told you, and she's really a force to be reckoned with, a symbol of courage, who also embodies what it means to be fearless. And what a pleasure it is to have her on board to impart this message of fearlessness today. Thank you so much, Zozi, for being with us. Yeah, I'm just going to ask you to unmute yourself.
Thank you so much for having me today, Joanne. I'm so excited. That was a lovely introduction, by the way. Thank you.
No, it's a great pleasure having you. Zozi, I want to start with a really simple question. How do you define fearlessness?
Joanne, whenever we think about fearlessness, we always think, it's the absence of fear, that, we don't have fear, which is impossible, because it is human to be scared and to have that fear. But for me, I always say it's looking above that fear and just pushing to find that extra something that gets you over the fear, pushing over whatever insecurities we have, whatever's making us scared and fragile. For me, that is, being fearless, just pushing through what's already there.
So there must have been times in your life when you were really fearful about particular things. What were those fears?
There's so many. There's so many, especially as a woman, you do have so many fears. But for me, I think I like to speak about my recent fear of getting into this career that I'm in. I think when I was going to compete for Miss Universe and Miss South Africa, it was a bit scary for me because I kind of knew what that environment was like and what that community was like. And I wasn't really your regular pageant girl or pageant queen, as I've been told. They've told me many times before, my hair is not right for it, or my body shape is not right for it, or I'm manly, or whatever it is that a lot of people said. And so I was scared to walk into that space, just simply because of the fear of thinking I wouldn't be enough for it. But it wasn't even about the physical, but fearing for myself as well, that I wouldn't be able to achieve the things that I want to achieve as a Miss Universe. And so just that fear of feeling like I'm not enough, or I'm not deserving to be in that space. So yeah, I think that was one of my biggest fears that I've had to overcome this past year.
Susie, how have you dealt with those fears?
I think it's just recognizing my right to exist and to be here. On the night of the pageant, I spoke about taking up space, and people will ask me all the time, what does that mean? And for me, like I said, it's recognizing my right to exist and that I belong here and that I should be here. And literally taking those fears and making them into something positive, because everything that was making me scared and making me feel like I wasn't enough was everything that I needed to propel myself. And so I just turned it into a positive, because I realized that so many women feel like me. So many people feel the way that I feel about themselves and about, venturing into new spaces. And so I was going to use it as a weapon, not only, to launch myself forward, but to pull other women in with me and to say, look, it's okay to be fearful and to be scared of walking into new territory, but we should use, what we think is negative about ourselves and what we think we're scared of, as positive, and to get us to where we need to be. And so that's how I got over it. I was like, you know what, these things that I have that I think are my fears, it's actually something that can help me and so many other more women.
I want to start with the most superficial fears we have, because there are many of them, right? We're dealing with internal and external fears. But to start off with an external fear, I mean, the threat of violence against us as women in South Africa is such a real thing, right? So you may want to be brave. You may have your First for Women button in hand to be able to contact Namola at a moment's notice if you actually encounter any danger in real life. But even though you take precautions, that feeling of fear is very real, that you could step out onto the street and you could potentially become the next victim of violence. How do we deal with those very real fears?
It's Joanne, it's a difficult time to be a woman, and like you said, we, especially in South Africa, live in one of the most dangerous places to be as a woman. And those fears are real. They're solicited. It's not something that we are imagining, as women. It's there. Women are missing every day. Women are dying every day. I mean, if I go on Twitter and I see a photo of a woman, the first thing that comes to my mind is panic, without even reading the caption of what's happening, because immediately my mind goes to, oh my God, she's missing, or, she was found dead somewhere. And it's really something that we need to deal with as a country. It's so deeply rooted in the way that, our systems are built. I just recently learned, through a conversation I was having and research, that there's so many steps that women have to take to report a crime. You know, that on its own for me is very scary to think I just went through something and I have to go through 1,000 steps, you know, to get justice and to get helped. And so, you know, it's those things that are real that I feel like, you know, they need to be taken more seriously as a country. You know, it's a crime and it should be taken as seriously as any other crime in the country.
Yeah, that's so true. Is there a way of changing the social systems that lead to this violence in the first place, Susie?
Yeah, I mean, I think through conversations, through education, I think that's one of the biggest tools that we could use. We really need to dismantle, you know, these systems that are not really for women, that are maybe patriarchal and really weren't built to protect the women of South Africa. You know, there needs to be a bigger conversation of even involving, you know, more women and more men into coming up with strategies that we can use to make sure that women are helped. Because right now where I'm sitting, I really don't feel like, you know, the systems in South Africa are for women, and so much more needs to be done.
You know, I so agree with you, because of course it moves into the private spaces in which we live as well. And those are some of the spaces in which we are most under threat as women. How do we begin to penetrate those spaces where we are victims of violence? Private spaces that it's very hard for legislators and for the police, for example, even to reach.
Yeah. Private spaces, you know, like our homes, where you're from the streets, you're scared of getting hurt at the streets, you're scared of getting hurt at work, and then you get home. And that still is not a safe space for women as well. And this is something that we need, again, to start dealing with from, you know, the bottom up. For one, when men are sitting together, what kind of conversations are you having with your friends, with your uncles, with your brothers, and with your fathers? Find a lot of men who will tell us that I'm not an abuser, I'm not this and this and that, but maybe you're an enabler. Maybe you are letting it happen. Maybe you do know someone who's like this. What kind of conversations are you having with them, you know, to educate them about gender-based violence and gender equality and consent? What conversations are you having with your sons? You know, you have a 5-year-old boy, a 6-year-old boy. What are you teaching them? Because essentially, you know, these are the boys that are going to grow up and be the men that we really want them to be in the world and society today. And so it starts like that, you know, it's programmed into young boys as well. So start having the right conversations of consent, and conversations of respect, but also taking it a bit further into schools as well. I think they could introduce a curriculum where they teach things like consent. You know, we already have our life orientation subjects, but I remember when I did LO in school, I never learned about consent. You know, I never saw them teaching boys how to look at us as, you know, equals, as people who deserve to live just as they do. And so there's so many ways, you know, that we could try to tackle this without solely putting the responsibility, you know, on legislature, like you said.
I want to speak about other spaces, which may sometimes be private or sometimes be public, depending on the nature of them, Sophie. But essentially, I want to move into the workplace next, because that's a highly patriarchal space in so many ways. We know those workplaces have been traditionally crafted around the worldview of men. They're fairly patriarchal in nature. And as women, we are learning to navigate those spaces, but often we're struggling, right? We're struggling with sexual harassment, we're struggling with bullying and the like. I mean, these are pretty difficult conversations to have in a place that already has that patriarchal framework as its outlook.
It's so interesting you mentioned this, because like I said, I live with Chasley Chris, Miss USA, and she is an attorney. Well, she still is, but she's not practicing obviously right now because she's Miss USA. But we were having a conversation about how when she was in the workspace, a conversation came about, you know, how she's dressed, how she conducts herself, you know, especially being an attorney in a space that's full of, you know, men, and like you said, a lot of patriarchal systems that are in there. And she said something so incredible about a woman who was older than her, who had been working there for a while, who, whenever she did something, she would pull, Chesley in to say, I have to make a way for you so that you don't struggle as much as I do. And it's so difficult for me to say, it has to be women who are championing this, because it's not us who are creating this environment in the first place. But it does help, when you have women who speak out and who stand up, who try to pull others in and to help as well. So if we could create, environments like that, where women knew that if we work together, we're so much more stronger, in unity in our voices. But also, how difficult can it be, Joanne, to just start dismantling patriarchal systems of work? It cannot be that difficult. I mean, it literally could be just sitting at the table and having everyone I think what people need to understand the most is that women are not asking for special treatment, they're asking for equality. And I think that's why, a lot of men become so cagey when it comes to patriarchy. But also, I think we need to remember that women can be, a part of patriarchy as well. It's not only a men thing. But I feel whenever we speak about dismantling patriarchy, people think, we're trying to topple feminism on top and have women and have men out of the door. And that's not what, feminism and women asking for equality is about. It's not asking for special treatment. It's not asking to be better than the next person. It's just asking for equality. And I think that's the first thing that we need to recognize before we dismantle the systems. It's equality we're asking for, not to come in and kick men out of the offices. So it's a lot. It's a lot, Joanne.
It is. But it's so interesting that you point that out. And a PWV survey, PwC survey, actually, sorry, the other day, it came out and it revealed some very interesting dynamics, particularly in large companies. So it doesn't matter whether the large companies are in the public sector or the private sector. Women executives in the larger companies in South Africa are earning a lot less than their male counterparts for doing exactly the same jobs. And essentially, you've got these very secretive sort of cliques that will not reveal what men earn, for example. So you will have no idea as a woman going into that position what you ought to earn for the same work you're doing as your male counterpart. How do we break that kind of thing down, Zozi?
Again, interesting that you mentioned that, because just this morning I saw a clip that Viola Davis posted on her Instagram of Oprah, saying when she started broadcasting, she used to earn half the amount that her co-host used to earn. And then when she confronted them, walked up to them and said, hey, so why am I earning, this much and my co-host is earning this much? And the first thing they asked her was, do you have a family? Do you have children to take to university? Do you have a wife to take care of? Which all of these things to me didn't even make sense, because we are doing the same job. And so essentially, again, it's not asking for special treatment. It's asking to be treated the same way. And again, maybe it's time that people started revealing, it shouldn't be a secret, who's earning what. And maybe you need to start having those open conversations within companies. And it starts with, firstly, hiring enough women and having enough women at the table, having them have a seat there to make those decisions. Because you will find that when these big decisions are being made, women are not in there, women are not involved. And so that's why we end up having so many of these problems, is because we were not included in the first place. And so include more women, into the conversation, so that, they too can have a part in the company. And it's just very unfair to even be having this conversation of trying to justify why women should earn the same amount of money when they're doing the same job. It's as simple as that. I'm doing the same job and I deserve to be paid the same amount as my next counterpart. Again, goes back to dismantling the patriarchal systems in the work. So much needs to be done, so much needs to be done with policies at work. What do your policies look like? Are they for women? Are they against women? Are they in favor of men? When was the last time that you opened those books to actually see, if these are in favor of women? And that's where it needs to start.
I want to go back to an earlier point you made, which is such an important one. And you rightly said it's difficult for us as women to start dismantling this patriarchy, and indeed, men ought to play a very important role in that, because they need to recognize themselves that the system is flawed, that it doesn't perpetuate equality, and that's the reason it needs to change. But at the same time, you spoke about women who are not enlarging that pie of empowerment for other women around them. And Susie, I've got a theory, and I want to hear your opinion on it. I think that's a fear-driven strategy as well. I think we've been shown or been taught or indoctrinated to think, particularly when it comes to senior positions in corporate or in powerful organizations, that the pie is so small and that women occupy just a very small percentage of those spaces. And that if you share those spaces with other women, there'll be nothing left for you. And I think that tends to be quite influential in how empowering women are going to be towards other women coming up the ladder. What do you think?
Mm-hmm. You're absolutely right, Joanne. You are 100% on it. It is a fear, and it's a very valid one. And it's not just in corporate spaces. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. You walk into a corporate interview, if you walk into an audition as an actor or as a model, if you walk in there and you see one woman, you know it's either me or her. It can never be the both of us, because that's how the world has made it to be. And so I think that's how women feel like that. And it really needs to stop. Why should I walk into an interview, see another woman, and they are directly my competition and not everyone else? I mean, we're here on competence, on skills, on abilities, and they level up, to both men and women. And so to hire me just to fill the quota of we have a woman in the office is quite, it's very insulting as well, because, I'm capable and just as much. Why can we, not hire 5 more women and bring them in as well? And so it's very valid that women feel that fear of, there has to be one woman in this space. If you come in, you're taking my space. And it's something that really needs to end, in workspaces and in every industry. Again, I think I like to think of it as, when you have one token Black person, one token woman, one token person of color, it happens a lot everywhere. And I think once we start bringing in different women, it will start dismantling the tokenism as well. Start hiring people on competence and what they can do, and not because, they're a woman or a man.
On that note, there's some really difficult conversations to be had in the workplace in regard to promotions, perhaps, pay, and so forth. And many of us as women are reluctant to have those conversations, right, Zozi? We think to ourselves, I'm going into this office now, my boss's office, to ask for an increase. I don't know if I really deserve it. I don't know if I'm asking for too much. I don't know if I'm being ungrateful for what I already have, or I don't know if I'm worthy of asking for this promotion. Kind of imposter syndrome, that we're dealing with on a daily basis, even though we've earned our way to that table. How do we overcome that, Susie?
Yeah. Again, I think it goes back to my taking up space message. Joanne, I like to tell women that you didn't use a back door to get in there. You are not there by mistake. You are not gate crashing. And so I think that's the first thing that we always need to keep in mind. You worked hard to get there, and so you should be there. These are things that I use to remind myself as well every day. Earlier on, I spoke about my fear of feeling like I don't deserve to be here, or I'm not enough for this. And for me, it's just a matter of, waking up every day and reminding myself of my competence, and using facts to remind myself of my competence. I'll wake up and I'll be like, firstly, I had to go through auditions back home. I had to win over a number of so many girls. Not only that, I had to travel all the way to USA and compete against 90 other countries, and I won. And so I should be here. It's the same as with you. You went to school, you graduated, you got your honors, you got your masters, you got your PhD. It's facts, it's not like something that you're making up in your mind. It's already there, it's written down. All you have to do is to just keep reading it to yourself and reminding yourself that you worked hard to get there. It wasn't by chance. It wasn't because you cracked the back door or you crawled in there and started gate crashing. you deserve to be there as much as the next person. And I think that that's something that we need to be honing in ourselves again from a very young age. Because I don't know if you've noticed, Joanne, with children, boys are so much more confident. They're very confident because they're told that you are a leader from a very young age. You're a leader, you're the head of the family, you're an heir. One day you're going to run this company. One day you're going to be a head of a home. And so it's ingrained in them from a very young age. And so that's why they walk the way that they walk and they talk the way that they talk when they walk into office spaces, and they just command because that's what they've been taught. Young girls, on the other hand, you're taught to be a follower. You are the neck that helps the head to move. You should always be 2 steps behind. And so we grow up to be those people. We didn't just automatically wake up and have these feelings of not belonging and these feelings of not being enough. It's something that you grew up with. Feeling like you shouldn't be able to lead, or you shouldn't be at a leadership position because you're a woman. And so again, it starts that conversation of owning our power and not being scared to step into our power, because we're very scared. We're scared of being labeled names. I mean, if you're a very strong leading woman, you get called names. If you're a strong leading man, you're courageous, you're brave, you're all of these amazing and wonderful things. And so it needs to start young. We need to start teaching girls leadership in every aspect: leadership at home, leadership in schools, leadership in society, so that we too can have the same arrogance that men have, and it's okay and acceptable to be arrogant.
Apologies, technology gets the better of me sometimes. I love what you're saying, and it interests me so much because I think we've also got to start at some point from a very practical way, in a very focused and deliberate way, starting to cultivate particular ways of gaining this confidence, of working towards leadership, of internalizing the right messages, right, that help us to promote ourselves, that help us to better our lives, and to take up that space in society, as you suggest. Do you have some really simple, useful tips that we can start with as women on that journey towards fearlessness?
It's probably sounds simple, but it's not as simple as it sounds. Self-affirmations it's such an important thing, and I talk about it all the time to people, because Joanne, before the world says mean things to us and about us, we say it to ourselves more than anybody else. I know this countless number of times when I've woken up in the morning and I just start being horrible to myself, and I just start being mean to myself. And I found that the more I started speaking life into myself, the more I started speaking words of encouragement and words of kindness to myself, I became so much more confident as a person, because then it didn't matter what the world was saying about me. I knew, who I am, and I know what I stand for. And so, it's something that I practice every day. It doesn't come naturally. I make a conscious decision to do that, to write it down, to read it to myself, and to remind myself. So for me, that's my first step, and that's my simplest step, really, is to just keep reminding ourselves and affirming ourselves. You just start growing bolder and confident once you start doing that.
Zozi, I'm going to start taking questions from some of our viewers now, and there's some great questions that come up here. I just want to go up a little bit in this chat box because they're coming in thick and fast as we speak. And one of the questions that came up is, this is from, I think it's Tinangaka. Hi, Zozibini. My apologies to ask a personal question. Have you ever felt insecure about your body?
Thank you so much, Joanne. Yes, I do sometimes feel self-conscious, about my body and wishing that, it was somehow perfect, because I do not think that it's perfect. And I just really think we've been exposed to social media and Photoshop and magazines so much that we have an idea of what we think the perfect body is. And I feel like your body is the perfect body. Everybody's body is the perfect body because it was created that way, to be that way. And so it's kind of difficult for us to have expectations of, reaching a Photoshop body or what other people's bodies look like. And so I do feel that way sometimes as well. But most of the days I do love myself, because I said, like, again, I'll stand in the mirror and I'll appreciate myself for all that I am, from being imperfectly perfect.
That's a lovely answer. I want to know, well, one of our listeners is asking, one of our viewers rather is asking, how do you find your purpose in life? And how do you build self-esteem if you grew up thinking you're not good enough? And I just want to extend this a little bit, please, Zozi, if you don't mind, because it's a very good question. You've touched on the socialization of girls, right, and why we behave this way. But sometimes the situation is even worse. Sometimes there's been some kind of childhood abuse of some kind of another, psychological, physical, sexual, and the like, that make it particularly difficult for some women to actually deal with this reality. And they grow up into adults who are severely wounded and damaged by what has happened to them. How do you go about, when that has been your frame of reference, coming out of it, finding your purpose and building that self-esteem?
And that's a very good one, Joanne. When it comes to finding purpose, some people are so lucky to find it earlier on in life. Some people are still on the journey of finding, what their purpose is. And for me, in my journey of finding my purpose, I think I had an idea of who I was and what I wanted to do, but I didn't know what platform or would get me there. I didn't know how I had to get there. I didn't know I'd have to be Miss Universe to use my voice to speak about things that I'm passionate about. But I knew that that's what I wanted to do. And, speaking of childhood traumas, again, it's just some people, you're very lucky to be born into a family, that cares, to be born into a family that helps you reach your dreams and where you want to go, to be born into warmth and love and kindness. But unfortunately, for others, it's not. It takes, a lot of self-work. People have spoken about psychology as well, which is something that is very foreign to people of color, to Black people, and I'm not saying that other people of other races don't have those same issues, but for me, whenever I speak about Black people in Black households or people of color, psychology and speaking about our traumas and speaking about our mental health is really sometimes frowned upon as weakness. Sometimes when you feel like you aren't right mentally, your parents don't understand, your grandparents don't understand what that is, because for them it's not a reality. Mental health is not a real thing. And so if you have that mental block, you need to start taking mental health as an illness, is serious. Start seeing a psychiatrist or a psychologist to help you, get through those traumas, have somebody to speak to. And so, that's what I would advise, Joanne. Obviously I am not a psychologist or a psychiatrist, but I think speaking to one and understanding that you need that help, and also speaking to families as well. If anybody is watching, and if a mother or a grandmother or father is watching right now, understanding that childhood trauma, mental health is real. It's a real thing, and we need to start taking it seriously, because that way we can never become the best version of ourselves if we aren't healthy, on the inside and in our minds.
I've got a really good question here from Snazo Ngayo. I think I know you, Snazo. What advice can you give a woman who's 20 years old in terms of how she can rely, trust, and also believe in herself? And I wish that I had asked someone that question 20 years ago, because that would have been very useful information, Zozi.
Sorry, Joanne, can you ask that again? How do I help a 20-year-old?
So this is a young 20-year-old woman who says, what advice can you give a woman who's 20 years old in terms of how she can rely, trust, and also believe in herself?
It's so interesting. When I was 20 years old, I had no clue. I had no clue about anything. And so I think she's on the right path by asking as a 20-year-old, first of all. Wanting to know is the first step towards trying to figure it out. But one thing that I will say is you don't have to have it all figured out by 20. That's step number one. We have this thing of putting age in everything that we do. And I think that's one thing that we need to scrap out, because our journeys are different. What I might reach at 20, somebody else might reach at 30, 35. Age shouldn't, determine where we should be in life and how far we should be in life. So first of all, you don't have to have it all figured out at 20, but I love that you want to have it figured out, because then it means you're able to start planning your life out better. And the only confidence you need is your capabilities and your abilities. What are you good at? What's that one thing that you sit and you're like, you know what, I'm good at this, or there's something that I'm not particularly good at, but I want to hone that craft. I want to learn, about it. Invest in that, invest in yourself. I think that's something we don't do a lot, is to invest in ourselves and the things that we love, and to start, mastering our crafts. So at 20 years old, that's my advice for you. I think that's what you should be doing. Investing in yourself, investing in your art, in your business, in whatever it is that you want to accomplish. You can start doing it now. And knowing that you are able. If not you, who else? This is what I always ask myself. If not me, who else? Why is the next person so deserving and I'm not? And so that's the question you need to start asking yourself, is don't start asking yourself, who am I to dream? Ask yourself, who am I not to dream? Who am I not to?
This is a very interesting question, because I think it touches on women outside of the urban areas, right, Zozi? And we know they have so many fewer opportunities than the rest of us who do live in urban areas. But this question is, how can one put herself out there in a very valuable way and not pressurized by social media images of women, especially if you're in the Eastern Cape, where there are fewer opportunities than provinces such as Gauteng or the Western Cape? And I want to just combine that with the next question, because that first one came from Nunzwakazi Beauty Makiwane. And Numbuyiselo asks, what plans do you have to drive this concept of fearlessness to specifically young rural girls? So I think that those two questions are potentially connected.
Yeah. It's a very interesting one, because I myself didn't grow up, in Johannesburg or in Cape Town. I'm born and bred in a village, grew up between that and a small town. And so it was so difficult, Joanne. It was so difficult to even dream. Even dreaming was a thing, because first of all, you're like, how am I even going to get there? There's so many things that I'm dealing with right here in my space. How can I possibly dream and try to get to that space? You spoke about social media, and unfortunately, in as much as social media can be a hindrance, but it can also help you to get there. I think social media is what we make it to be. Back then, people didn't have an opportunity to use the internet and social media to launch ourselves forward. But now I feel like we can, regardless of where you are. You have information at your fingertips through the internet. You have information and an opportunity to engage with other people who are outside your space. And so I would advise anyone to use social media to their advantage. Use it as a tool to build, instead of using it as a tool to, disrupt. And to further the answer of, what would I do to get into villages? One thing that I struggled with when I was growing up is nobody ever came to us. Nobody ever came to us about anything. I remember this one time when we had what do they used to call these visits? Career guide thing in high school, where people would come in. They would come in once in a while and would teach us about 3 careers, not even broadening the prospect of what we could do with our lives. And so it never helped with anything. And so we need to do better in that aspect. And so if I am able to help with that and fearlessness, I think it would be actually go into those spaces, speak to the people in there, understand them, analyze what it is that they need. Don't have one program to help the village and some urban areas and towns. Design it specifically to those people of that space. What matters to them. Who are they at their core? And so for me, if I were to further that message, I'd have to go there literally to understand the people there, and what it is that they need to get over. What is this fear that they have? Design it specifically to that. And so I think because of technology, we have lost that human touch, and sometimes it is very needed for us to be there as humans, to have that human to human contact. And so I think that's what's missing, places like the KZN and places like Eastern Cape or Limpopo are forgotten places. People forget to go check up and see what is happening there. We see it in our education system, we see it in our health system, that it is just forgotten. It feels and seems like nobody cares, and somebody needs to start taking notice, and they need to start caring for those people.
So see, here's one about networking, and the question is a little bit ambiguous, but let's try and tackle it. One of our viewers says, "Hi Zozi, networking for women can be challenging, especially with males. Please give us some networking tips." So I'm not sure whether that means males getting in the way of networking or networking with them themselves, so that we can just broaden our horizons, perhaps.
Again, I think it goes back to not seeing other women as your opponents all the time, but seeing them as somebody who can help you push yourself forward into your career. I think that's what can help, with networking. Women need to know that we're not all here to fight each other. Actually, if we started working together even more, we could be able to enter the spaces, more than we are right now. And so I think that's how we can start. What are you doing to empower women in your community? What are you doing to empower women in your circle as, a woman? That's where it starts. If you are the only woman who's succeeding in your company, if you are the only woman who's succeeding in your circle, that shouldn't make you comfortable. That shouldn't make you should want to bring in, other women to make sure that we are moving forward to bridging that gender gap and that gender inequality. And so I think that's the mentality that we need to start having when it comes to networking. If you are going into a networking circle, bring a friend, so that the next time they meet someone, they can bring a friend too, and they can bring someone else too, and then the networking circle becomes bigger. I think we need to let go of that mentality of seeing women as our opponents and enemies, but rather start working together, because that's what men do. Men look out for each other. They're not afraid of looking out for each other, and that's what we need to start doing too.
Zozi, I don't think we have many more questions, but some lovely comments here that I want to share with you. Nomtunzi Bongolo is saying to us, "Hi Zozi, you're such an inspiration to our children. We love you for that." Priska Luawa says, "Hi, I'm 18 and you're my inspiration." But maybe we should turn that into a question, right? That's what all good interviews do. How important is it for young women who are coming up, through school or into the workplace or into tertiary institutions, to have role models like you in the world to look up to believe that a young girl from the Eastern Cape, without the attention, without the input of officials around her or systems that work for her, can actually make it on the international stage?
It's said, Joanne, it's been said many, many a times that we can't be what we can't see. We need to start seeing it to believe it. And so that's why it's so important to have role models that are representative of so many people, which is why inclusion is important, which is why representation is important. Young people need to start seeing themselves in people that are in positions of influence. And so that's why it's important. When Barack Obama, for instance, became the first Black president of America, that triggered something in some young boy somewhere who never knew that it was possible for them. Just that one speck of light, lit up something in someone just because they saw it, just because they felt represented. A young girl in a village probably saw a photo of me on a newspaper somewhere, and it sparked something in them to know that they too, can become something. And so that's why it's important to have representation and inclusion, and to make sure that we have different women, men, everyone, that young boys and girls can look up to and start dreaming of a better future for themselves. The Rugby World Cup, Siya Kolisi. I mean, I think everybody saw this video of him signing a boot of a young boy who was in a crowd. This boy was crying, because I think in his mind, he was, looking at this figure and seeing himself so much and realizing that You know, I'm a young boy from the Eastern Cape in these dusty streets, and he's from the same place. Look where he is. And it's so much more possible for me. So that's why it's so important, Joanne, you know, to have people in the spaces that are very representative of everyone.
There's a lovely message from Kabagonza Puth who says, hey, Zozi, you are my great inspiration. It's time to break the boundaries. Fearless. Jan August says, I love what you're saying, Zozi. Let's be the difference we want to see. Own our space if we're the only female. It's a start. That's quite a scary prospect in some ways, because on the one hand, it's wonderful to be in a community of women, as we are right now in real time, having this discussion, feeling inspired by each other. But then we go out into the big bad world, and it might be a little scary, and it might take quite a bit to overcome the fear of being the first woman who starts that change.
Yeah, being a first is is quite, you know, a scary thing, and you know, to have so many young people saying they look up to you, it does, you know, give that sense of pressure, and all of those things. But I think it's incredible, you know, at the same time, that we can be able to have conversations in the spaces and push ourselves and push our boundaries. You know, I think if we keep pushing harder, the world has no choice but to take notice. You know, the big bad world has no choice but to stand still. I think we've seen, you know, whenever I speak about the youth today, we speak about, you know, how radical the youth is and how impatient they are. And I think that's incredible for me, you know, on my part, that we can keep, you know, pushing like this. And like you said, the big bad world will then have to stop and take notice if we scream as loud as we can.
Yeah, for sure. Jeanette Lawson says, after a very tough week, this is exactly what I needed to be a part of. Thank you so much, Susie. Thanks for that, Jeanette. And a nice one, this question came to us from YouTube, Tandiswa Madadasana, saying, I have a 5-year-old son whom I'm ensuring is raised in the manner that you are referring to. Do you think that it's possible for all boys to be raised this way, Numbuyiseni?
I do. I really do. I really do think it's possible, you know, to start raising, like I said, these young boys to be the men that we need. If we start the work today, you know, if parents start committing today, you know, a huge change can happen. I do believe it. I really do, Joanne, believe that a change can happen if you know, we start grooming, you know, these boys to be those young men. I really do. I think that's one of the ways that we can do this. It's just that parents need to start committing, you know, to doing it this right way.
Definitely. Tandiswa, start spreading the word. Make sure your friends are raising their children exactly the same way that you are. Yep. Riselo asked a personal question. What has been Miss Universe taught you about yourself?
I think it's just taught me that I have so much more thicker skin than I thought, you know, I did. Everybody who will know me growing up will know that I was very, you know, soft and very shy. And I think even when I was about to leave high school into university, my parents, you know, were worried about whether or not I'd be able to deal with the big bad world. But I think I've proven myself to them that I can. And so I think that's one thing being Miss Universe has really taught me, is that I have so much more thicker skin than I do. And it's taught me that I have such an understanding of people. It has taught me to have an understanding of, you know, different people, different races, different cultures, because I've had to speak to so many people from different countries and backgrounds. It's opened me so much more to, you know, understanding different people. And so I think that's been my biggest lesson as well.
So see, we are starting to wrap up now, and I want to just pull this all together, and perhaps you can help me do that by just giving me one last thought that you want to leave our viewers with today.
I think, you know, speaking on fearlessness, that should be our theme, not only for Women's Month or this month, but our theme for the rest of our lives. Because once we start, you know, getting over our fears, we are able to achieve things that we're scared of. So if you wanted to start that business, do it today. You know, the minute you log out of this live that you're watching, you know, pick up your notebook, start dreaming again, start writing down the things that you wanted to achieve. You know, today is the day to start that business. You know, there will never be a right time to start following your dreams. So register that business that you wanted to register. You know, have the courage to register for school. If you wanted to go back to university, this is the time to do it. If you want to leave that relationship that has been horrible and toxic to you for years, this is the time to do it. There'll never be a right time. You know, leave, cut yourself out of that relationship, or friendships or spaces. If you have, you know, that job that has been weighing you down, that you've been scared to leave because you think there's no other better opportunity, there are other better opportunities. Sometimes our mental health, you know, and our emotional health is as important, you know, as our physical and our financial things. So I think what I want to leave people with is today, take that leap of faith. You know, let this be that day. You know, when you keep putting things off in your mind, you're like, I'm going to do it tomorrow. I'm going to do it next week. Let today be your tomorrow. Let today be your tomorrow. Otherwise, you will never take that leap and you will never jump. So that's my message. You know, let today be that day.
Yeah. I'm still going to ask you for one last comment on the issue of fearlessness. And I think we will understand, Zozi, that this is not going to happen overnight. I mean, I think some of the seeds you've planted today are beautiful, and they're going to germinate in the listeners and the viewers who've been part of this conversation today. Take time, right? I think one ought not to be too hard on oneself if it's taking a little longer to get to that point of fearlessness that you would hope to in a shorter time, perhaps.
Absolutely. That's very true, Joanne. It's kind of like an overnight success. You know, people always say overnight successes didn't happen overnight. There was so many work that went into it, so many hours, so many years, and then finally it happens. That's what being fearless is like as well. Nobody just wakes up one day and they're like, I am, you know, the most fearless person ever. You make that conscious decision to commit to it every day of your life. You know, you wake up and you start conditioning yourself to get there, and one day it's going to come. So, you know, if you are not the bravest person today, that's okay. If you're not the most fearless person today, that's okay too. There will come a point in your life where you will get there if you start, you know, working on it today.
Zozi, what a pleasure it's been talking to you, and what an opportunity to be able to connect with you across the world during this time when we're all still partially in lockdown, at least. And to tap into your wonderful well of ideas and listen to how you have molded yourself into a fearless woman. You do us proud on the international stage, and you are such a wonderful model, excuse the pun, in more ways than one for South African women. So I'm really so delighted to have had this opportunity to speak to you and to get a real deep insight into what it is that drives you. And thank you for sharing this with us. Thank you from your position in the international arena now, actually throwing us a lifeline down here and saying, look, you can make it if you want. That really has been such a valuable thing, and you do it with great humility, even though you have made such a wonderful success of your life. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Joanne. This was incredible. And thank you so much to everybody who watched and sent in their questions and their comments. I appreciate it so much.
So Zozi, thank you for that. And let me just give you a little bit more information as we say goodbye to Zozi. I want to thank you as our viewers for joining us today. It's really been a pleasure having you. It's a pity that we can't see you, but I'm glad that I know that you're there, especially because you've sent in all your great questions this afternoon. But for those of you who were not able to watch it in its entirety, or you'd like to watch it again, or you have a family member or a friend you'd like to share it with, it is possible to watch a rebroadcast of this, right? There is going to be a recorded session that is available, and further information will be included in the thank you mailer that will be sent out to you after the event. So please keep an eye out for it. This might be something you just want to go back and refer to at a time in your life when you're feeling low or you need some inspiration. So I urge you to make use of it at that time when you need it the most. Also, a special thank you to First for Women Insurance for their partnership. It's been lovely working with the team, a dedicated team of women who are driving this cause forward. Again, sorry, unintentional pun, but it really has been fantastic to be part of a team that is engaged in really in promoting this cause in a way that is going to give South African women the tools to improve their lives on an everyday basis. It's great being with you this afternoon. I'm Joanne Joseph. Thank you so much for joining us. Take care.